Okay, we're recording. Welcome everybody to Monday, February 12th, 2018 edition of Kubernetes SIG service catalog. Aaron, are you going to execute the agenda?
Yep.
Okay. All right, take it away.
Cool. I think everybody knows how it works. Got my high-tech equipment today. So let's just get started. Paul, I got you first to show off a project for quickly building brokers. Take it away.
Okay. We have had several people in the community asking if there's a way to just easily get started. I actually have a group of students at Boston University that I'm mentoring that are working on a project that is exposing let's see, I think it's called a data lake via a service catalog and a service broker. And then I was also doing a talk a couple weeks ago and wanted to have all new content. So those three things put together kind of gave me an idea for this project. I've been working with Lily Chosik, who is in the Slack channel, and a little bit with Carolyn, who everybody knows already. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'll just show this really quick. The idea, and we're trying to figure out the best way to actually implement this, but the idea would be that you can clone a Git repo and easily get started and iterate on a broker, and that you should be able to make your own code changes and then pull in a new version of the actual supporting bits and get new features in the future. You do not have to learn exactly where all the fields go on requests, or which are query parameters and which are in the request body, to just start iterating. So here we go. I'm in master. I do make deploy Helm, and since I'm going to maybe show some iteration, I'm just going to add that tag equals latest thing on there. So this builds a binary, builds a container image, deploys a chart that runs the broker binary in a container, has a service in front of it for the stable DNS, and makes a cluster service broker. So when this is over, we'll have a new broker in the catalog, and we'll see a new service pop up. So any questions while this is running? I've got about probably 1 minute.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so while we're waiting, I assume the user, when they actually type up their business logic, for lack of a better term, they're basically just sort of filling in templates or filling out interfaces type of stuff. Can you show us the template or the thing that the infrastructure around it that they would just be filling in?
Yeah, sure. I can. Let me show the rest of this demo, and then I can switch. I'm only sharing my terminal window right now, and I'll switch to my browser and I'll show that.
Okay, cool.
All right. So let's see. I see that I need to update the name from when this used to be called the broker skeleton, but there is a cluster service broker. What I have found is that initially the first request times out because it's made before there's a pod there behind the service. So at some point in the future, this will go through. Bam, there we go. All right, so cluster service broker is ready now. Let's see, it's vcat. Oops. I'm in the wrong place, that's why. Oh, let's try. Let's see. Get cluster service classes. All right. So you can see I've got a cluster service class in here. Let me use the svcat binary, and we'll take a look at that, what it looks like in that. Am I writing this command correctly, Carolyn? Am I missing an argument?
No, that's right. Is the name right? The external name? Broker skeleton's the broker, but you're describing a class.
Ah, you are correct. I'm sorry. I hope you all accept my apology. Example starter pack service. Now, I guess we know exactly how deterministic my brain is. All right, so there we go. We can, that's 0 to, we've got a new service broker in, looked like maybe 5 minutes. And I will stop sharing now and switch to my browser.
So I have a quick question. So is this, Paul, this looks like awesomeness. Is it correct that this is for both like creating the skeleton that you can extend for your own purposes, but also is this for like deploying in like a test loop kind of thing?
Yeah, those are both goals, like quick start, quick iteration, and then hopefully a base layer for like so by way of example, we have a couple brokers that we wrote at Red Hat, and this is something that I did as some dude, not as a Red Hat employee, but we are looking at now abstracting or taking out the reusable pieces of the brokers that we've already written. And this is maybe one of the pieces that falls out of it that I hope that will either push some good batteries included bits that we've figured out writing brokers that run on top of Cube in the future into this, or a layer built on top of this. But the immediate use case is quickly start from 0 and iterate fast.
Cool.
So let's see here. Doug asked about the interface that we're implementing. I'll put this link into the chat. I'll share my screen again. So basically, right now, and this is subject to change because Carolyn, for example, has pointed out that some of the reuse patterns that I had in mind are maybe not the best, but in terms of what you implement, there is a interface called Business Logic that has hooks for validating the API version, get catalog, provision, deprovision, last operation, bind and unbind, all your favorites. And there is basically a minimally functional implementation of this interface in this project under PKG user. There's also a hook for adding your own CLI flags and factory methods for, the making the sausage of connecting up your custom code with the thing that calls it. It's possible that in the future, like in the short-term future, that we may split this into a quick start project and a library. But basically, the idea in the current incarnation is that all your code that you need to make should be confined to this one package.
Cool.
That's what I got.
So Niall, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think that Paul has already answered the question I was going to ask. So my question was like, apart from just having a starter part, it would be nice to just have like a shared library with like releases and things, so you can just update it to the latest version instead of cloning the new version and keeping up with the starter part repo.
Yep, I agree. And just also for the record, one of the gimmicks of the starter pack thing as it is now is that the provision request, for example, that you get is the same one that you write to use the client. So the interface you implement is in terms of the same client types.
So I had one.
Ease the mental load of going between the two.
So I had another question. We did some storage work in the Azure broker. So I wonder if at some point in the future, if you would want to get like the storage interface and we have a Redis implementation of the storage, if you would want to get that upstream to your project as well.
Yes, that is the kind of thing that I have in mind when I say like a batteries included experience. Another one, just as an example, is like when you're on the receiving end of the call from the catalog, you have to do some kind of check to see whether the entity that like rings you up is actually allowed to talk to you. And what we've done on the Red Hat side for that in our brokers is they do like a subject access review on a special verb that basically checks the to see if the catalog itself, whether its token is allowed to talk to the broker. And that's another thing that we want to push into this layer so that like you don't just get like a skeleton that gets you 80% of the way there with like the REST calls and stuff, but you actually get something that has the right building blocks to develop a production ready broker.
So just quick question, and I'll get to you, Doug. Is now the right time, Paul, to start upstreaming stuff to your OSB starter repo?
I want to give it give me maybe a week so I can do some transformations that are pretty clear that they need to happen. And if you want to help do those transformations, I am 100% happy to receive help. Carolyn has already pointed out some things that make me think that we should reshuffle this just a tiny little bit.
Okay. Cool. All right, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, so Paul, it's really cool. Just two things. One is, I haven't taken a look at your Makefile yet, but I'd recommend you make it so that people can build the stuff or build a Docker image independent of Kubernetes. And then two, related to that is then I think you should show this off in the OSB working group calls because I think they find it useful as well.
Yeah, I've actually mentioned to Matt and Alex because I was hanging out with them in London before I gave the talk where I showed this. I was planning on showing it tomorrow, and there is you do not need Cube to build the image at all. There's a make image that just does a Docker build. That's a dependency of the target that I ran.
Sounds good.
All right, cool.
Cool. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my experience getting up and running with this because it went really well, and I wanted to call that out. I originally tried this with the Pivotal Cloud Foundry, starter library that they had to kind of help you get up and running. They had one for Go, and I probably spent like 2 days on that, just trying to get it the way I wanted and everything. And then Paul pinged me about this, and I was able to switch over immediately, copy my code where it belonged, and like 5 minutes later, it was running. So that was a really, really good experience. And I hope once we figure out how to keep things in sync, that'd be really good. Because like the very first thing I did was I wanted to not have it be, you know, Paul's repo and OSB starter pack. I wanted to call it whatever it is I was going to call it, and that like changed every single file in the repo. But I think hopefully when if we split it, I don't know, I want to speak for Paul, but like hopefully when we split it, it'll be a lot easier to keep up to date and take syncs, and until we get to that point, like if you submit more stuff upstream, it's kind of hard for people to consume them.
Yeah, I agree. And I am very glad that you played with the repo, because I am not good at imagining what other people will do. So it was a very useful data point that you're like, I don't want to rebase this thing the way that you have in mind.
I just wanted to, you know, ruin everything you did. And, you know.
Yeah, well, mission accomplished, Carolyn. Good job.
All right. Cool. Do we have any other comments, questions, etc. for this topic before we move on? Looks like a no. All right. Niall, you want to start talking about some non-happy path issues in the happiest way possible?
Yeah. Let me just find some links. So we have these two issues, which I can find the other one. Oh yeah. Yeah, so we have these issues that if the provisioning fails for a couple of reasons, like one of them is just that request times out, and the other, I think, is also like even more common, is that if the spec is incorrect, we just receive 400 bad requests, and in that case, we just mark the instance for terminal error. So with the connection timeout and 500, I think we do orphan mitigation, and for bad requests, we don't do anything, we just give up. And the problem is that once you update the spec, source code does accept the new spec, but it doesn't do anything. It just basically it just checks that the status has a terminal error and doesn't do anything. So it's really confusing, I think. So first of all, probably I don't know, why do we accept this spec at all if we see that this instance is not we can't really do anything about the new spec, right? So it's for me, it was like, from the user experience, it wasn't clear why there's nothing happening. I was thinking whether it's some bug in service catalog. Then I went through the code and saw that there was actually a comment saying that any non-successful status, HTTP status, is treated as a terminal error, and it wasn't clear. I don't know, maybe we want to update some status more clearly. And ultimately, I would just, as I said in the issue, that we probably want to actually be able to retry provisioning without having to create a new instance every time. And there are some other issues where when, for some reason, binding gets stuck and we can't really delete it, other than I just recently learned that you can just delete the finalizer and force the deletion this way, but it's still probably not the best UX. So yeah, for us, really, because we're using Smith project on top of service catalog, and all that it does, it manages the service catalog objects declaratively. So there is no way to actually tell Smith that you need to delete the old instance and create a new one, because it just founds the existing one and it tries to update it. So we have to go and manually delete the instance first, and only after that, Smith will be able to create a new one. So it's really confusing from our point of view. So only the success path currently works more or less for us. And if anything breaks, we basically just have to delete and manually clean up everything before proceeding. So it's really, really, really annoying part from us, and I think that we should, like, I will try to probably describe these issues in more details and take some of this to fix some issues. That's my point.
Sounds annoying. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to spool back into my head like the context around why we made the decisions that we did. I think that you're correct that at least part of this is working as design. That I do recall having a discussion where we said that like terminal errors should just be terminal, and you've got to clean them up and resubmit resources. What you're saying in this conversation now makes me think that we should just retry provision, and that it should not be, it should not require orphan mitigation. I would definitely be up for discussing that. One thing that I'm also aware that people have run into is that there are a number of different conditions that catalog resources can get into where you cannot delete them, in the sense of like, if the broker is unavailable, there is no way to, using only kube control delete a binding or an instance. And removing the finalizer is the workaround for that. And I think that well, actually, I have a fair amount of context to share. So we have some bugs to represent these same things that we have upstream issues for in the incubator repo. And I sat down last week and was like, I'm going to make force delete work. And at the end of that thread of trying to make force delete work, I can share some information. I actually created an issue for this that has the information, so I won't just be shouting into the wind or anything. I'll link the issue in the chat here. So what I learned when I tried to actually go and make this work is that kube control, or that force deletion, is basically like a client-side only concept. There is code for pods, for example, that makes force deletion do what it does for pods. When you use force deletion, or there's another switch, confusingly, that you can send to delete called -- now, literally nothing is differentiated in any way about the request that actually goes to the API server. So I think in the future, perhaps what we could do is put a command into svcat that would do the finalizer thing for you. However, I think we need to be super careful about that, and this is why. Is one thing that like seems to be a theme with users is that they don't understand, and I think we need to do a better job of articulating this in our documentation, which is something that we've already agreed needs to be improved for 0.2.0. But users do not expect that it is okay for, and expected that when they delete a resource, it doesn't immediately go away. And so we need to be very careful about providing a tool to allow users to force delete, because we don't want them to use that as thinking they're using a shortcut, and then they get the AWS or Azure or GCP or Bluemix bill or whatever in a month, and they're like, what is this? There's an extra 0 on this bill, because they just got in built up muscle memory where they're force deleting things, and it leaves resources running around that aren't cleaned up. So I think we should definitely make that work. I have some ideas in that issue that I linked about exactly how much warning text and interactive typing of yes, I understand what I am doing, etc., that you should have to do. And EOF from me on that. Aaron, it looks like you have a substantial comment that you typed in.
Yeah, I'll just talk about the recursive. So we talked about a specific case where we wanted to recursively delete. Like if you delete an instance, wanted to maybe recursively delete all the instances children bindings. And then we got into the discussion of what happens if unbinding fails. Then we have this like Frankenstein mix of recursive and force. And that seems like a really good candidate to kind of bundle in with this solution that you're talking about, Paul.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I feel like maybe we should just bite off the force delete for a single instance, probably just for bindings because we don't have to consider recursive. And then from there, we've got a foundation to talk about what do we do about recursive deletes.
Yeah. I also definitely think that before we change any code, we should make a doc PR, and I am happy to personally do this, that maybe in the walkthrough to start with, we can say, hey, if you delete something and it doesn't go away, don't panic, because that's how you tell the catalog that it should be deleted. Catalog still has some work to do sometimes to actually finish deleting the thing. Like I've had folks that literally pinged me on IRC saying, my binding didn't go away, my instance go away, and when I'm like, look again, they're like, oh, there it goes. So we need to do some education of users on this stuff too.
Yeah. Now go ahead.
Yeah, I have two things to say. So first of all, about the deletion UX, I think that one of the things we can do better, not just have a walkthrough, but also in the status, apart from the flag, maybe have a status message or something where we can probably have more descriptive way of saying, hey, we're actually going to delete this binding, just wait a little bit. So currently it just says, the binding is successfully provisioned. And when you delete it, just has a flag of like deletion required or something like that. And it's not really clear that the service catalog has picked up the deletion and it will proceed soon. So I think that's the place where we can improve as well. And back to the initial issue I have been talking about, that so for connection timeout and some other issues, we do need orphan mitigation according to OSB spec. But after the orphan mitigation has succeeded, is that okay for everyone to reuse the UID for provisioning a new instance? Because like as far as I understand, the reasoning behind not retrying was that like if your initial provisioning has failed, it's basically, okay, this instance has never existed and you want to have a completely new one independent. So we don't have any interest in that, I guess. We are okay with reusing the UIDs for provisioning again and again if something breaks at initial provisioning. So like, obviously, if you have deprovisioned, previously successfully provisioned instance, maybe that's not a good idea. But if you have never successfully provisioned it, it should be fine, I guess.
Cool. Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that right now all we do is we set that deletion timestamp, and then the status is exactly the same as it was before, which confused me incredibly when I first started. And even something as small as saying like deletion pending would have reassured me that I just need to be patient. That's it.
Yeah, I was just going to basically echo that too. I think it's kind of like docs and layers. We've got a walkthrough doc. We can probably put it in like another reference doc somewhere. We can put it into a status, and we probably can also have svcat look for that status and have it actually spell out that the deletion is in progress. Please do not force delete this yet, or something like that. And we can actually have that point back to GitHub Docs as well. So that's it. Paul, you're up next. Go ahead.
I totally forgot what I was going to say.
All right, we'll put you on the back burner then. Matt, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to the idea of reusing that ID with OSB spec. I think it's not clear in the OSB spec whether you can ever reuse that ID, and to the point of, okay, it may be all right to use that ID if an instance has never actually been successfully provisioned. The whole point of orphan mitigation is that we don't know if it was ever successfully provisioned.
Yeah, so I have also examined the OSB spec, and I haven't found anything clearly saying whether reusing IDs is allowed or not. And I think that, yeah, you're right that like we never know, like the purpose of orphan mitigation is that we don't know whether it was actually a successful provision. But from the service catalog point of view, we never really, I guess we never really propagated the instance coordinates, or like never created bindings for that instance, right? So it's, even if the instance has been provisioned in the past, it basically haven't been ever used for anything apart from being just provisioned.
Cool. So Niall, I had you with a hand up as well. Is there more you want to add here?
No, that's it for me.
Okay. Paul, do you remember what you wanted to say?
Nope.
All right. You're bumped to the back of the list again then. Matt, go ahead.
Where I belong.
Yeah. So another thing maybe we would consider is relaxing the immutability of that external ID that we're storing in service catalog. And if we're doing orphan mitigation, then maybe we just assign a new external ID.
I really dislike that idea. For the reason that I would not expect to have the spec change on me after I already like created the object. I think a much better story for users would be if you get a timeout on provision that we just resend the request, because like we resend the request anyway. I don't see any, honestly, I don't see any need to even do the orphan mitigation in that case where you have a timeout on provision. But I'd be interested in hearing what other people had to say about that. The long and short of it to me is that take for example Niall's use case where he doesn't have a good way to like reprogram his thing to resubmit a resource. Taken in that light, it sounds very un-Kubernetes to be like, this is broken, you have to delete and recreate it now.
I would agree. Doug, you are up next. Go ahead.
And so I think on timeouts, you're supposed to do orphan mitigation per the spec. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But the real reason I got my hand up was because either Niall or Matthew, can one of you guys open up an issue in the open source broker spec so we can get clarity on whether we can reuse IDs or not, just to force the issue? Because whether we can or not, I don't have an opinion on it, and I probably don't think we should. But we should make sure the spec says one way or the other and be explicit about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can create an issue.
Thanks.
Aaron, can you add an action item, or who makes?
Yes. Matt, you're up next. I'll add the action item while you talk.
All right. I think the the timeout part where we're actually just not able to make a successful HTTP connection is one case that may be easily solved. But I think there are other use cases where we may want to do retries. For example, the user just didn't put the right information in the spec and wants to update it rather than creating a whole new instance to fix whatever kind of provisioning issue they may have had with that instance. So I wasn't around when the decision was made about external ID going in the spec. Is that something that maybe the external ID could go in the status instead, and then we wouldn't have a cube issue with changing that external ID?
It's kind of tricky for that one. Default fields in status are not have their own complications. I'm trying to spool this stuff back into memory now. I wonder if this might be something that we would be well served to have like a call maybe on like Wednesday to talk about, and maybe we can pick a couple of these things and drill into them and just kind of Tiger team making some of the big rocks go away on the most common non-happy path things.
It sounds like we've got timeouts and then 400 and 500. Because timeouts we're kind of unclear. That's what the action item is for. And then we know 400s don't, oh yeah, Niall, you wrote it out. So 400 don't need an orphan mitigation, but 500 does. So I guess we probably should talk about like not only are we doing it and are we to spec, which I think we are, but also what should the message be in the status when we're trying to do those things. And I'll stop now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that like we can discuss for particular response status, like or for connection timeout, for example, whether we need to do the orphan mitigation. But I think the question for me is a bigger one. Like once we have like either have finished orphan mitigation, or in case of bad request, we just reported that the something is wrong with the spec. After that, currently, Service Cloud just gives up. And after optional orphan mitigation, my suggestion is that we should be able to, like in case of connection timeout, we don't probably even need a resource version bump. We just can retry. And in case of 500 internal server error, probably as well, I'm not sure. And in case of bad request, for example, once the spec has been changed, so we need to track whether resource version has been bumped. And if it is, we should be able to retry. That's like my naive point of view.
Doug, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of questions for Matthew. I just want to make sure I understand what you're suggesting. Were you suggesting that we allow the service catalog code to update the external ID so that we could retry without having to worry about possibly conflicting with a previously used ID?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I would actually recommend that, if I understand the complete scenario, that we probably don't want to do that, because if the request actually did go all the way through and the backend did actually create something with that ID, a subsequent request with a new ID is just going to leave orphans, which would be bad because that could cost money. But a new request with the exact same ID should find the same resource again and just say, oh, we're already finished. I hope anyway.
Thought that should 409.
I think if it has the exact same data, it should return a 200, but let me double check.
Yes, 200 and yeah.
But Matt, you're right. The assumption would be that we did a delete to finish orphan mitigation. There's nothing provisioned with that ID, and the OSB broker should just treat it like it's never seen it before. I recall that's from memory in the spec. So someone correct me if I'm wrong, if you've got it open. Yeah, go ahead, Naya.
Yeah, so the problem with orphan mitigation is that it is implemented the way that Source Catalog just sends a delete request. So there is no difference between between successfully provisioning and not knowing about it and deprovisioning it, and the case where you have actually successfully provisioned it, created bindings, whatever, and then deprovision it. So and I guess that's what Matt is trying to say, that we can't, from the OSB point of view, we can distinguish the cases where we try to orphan mitigate and when we actually deprovision previously provisioned instances. Is that correct?
I see both sides of this. Just stepping back for a sec, I wanted to just do a time check. We've got 15 minutes. I suspect that the final element here is not going to take all 15 minutes, but I want to give it a fair shot. So I think it's probably best, can someone kind of lead organization of a smaller discussion, probably on Wednesday, somewhere around there, so we can drill in more and actually make a plan for what to do? Any volunteers? I will volunteer then. Let me make a note real quick.
I would love to volunteer. I do not have time to be the volunteer.
Yeah, so on that topic, I probably will organize it. I may not be able to be there. So I'll Slack people on the Kubernetes Slack and help set something up. Deprovisioning. Orphan mitigation. Okay. So we've got the last item here. Paul, you wanted to talk about the release process. I wanted to just be like a peanut gallery, so I'll shut up for that. And Paul, why don't you take it away?
So I mostly wanted to remind folks that we did groom the O.2.0 milestone in GitHub, and I'll put a link to that. And I would say that if you are interested in contributing, it looks to me, the last time I looked at this, which is not right now, it hasn't loaded yet, but I'm about to look at it again. It looks like there are a fair number of issues here that are unaccounted for without somebody to drive them. I would love for folks to raise their hand and volunteer to drive some of these things. By drive, I mean if it's a design issue, put forth a proposal, work on getting consensus in the group, and then either implement it or work with somebody else to get it implemented. If you don't want to do that part, it's totally fine to take smaller items and then to code bigger ones that other folks have already driven to consensus. That's totally fine. I would love for as many people to put their hand up for one of these as I could get. And that's basically it from me.
Cool. I'll say my piece here. It's pretty different, but related. So I think last month I promised to make up a list of sort of big requirements for GA. I apologize greatly for letting that completely slip out of my mind. I want to check in though again and see if something like that would actually be helpful for people to know where we stand, not necessarily for O.2.0, but for the longer term, how do we get to 1.0.0? So that's my question to folks. What do you guys think?
I think that would be very useful, yeah.
Okay. Any other opinions? Okay. I will get that done this week then. I'd like to keep it a living document, so I'm going to put it into Google Doc and I'll link it from here, the Google group, etc. I want to keep track of where we are so we can get a sense of how many milestones we have to go between now and 1.0. So that's sort of, transparency around my my intentions here. So that's all for me. Got any other comments, questions, etc. here? Okay. Well, I hereby grant you 11 minutes back on the day. Yeah, that's all. I guess you'll be here. People will be hearing from me about the Wednesday meeting. I'll notify everyone and gauge interest if anyone wants to join. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. Talk to you guys soon.
See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.